Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, November 15th, 2022. The House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy gets his party's nomination for House Speaker, as assuming Republicans go on to get a House majority. Still a few races to be called, but they are getting close. But Kevin McCarthy also getting a challenge from the Freedom Caucus chair, Congressman Andy Biggs, and the vote among Republican House members raising some questions about whether Kevin McCarthy can get to 218 votes needed in the full House in January during the next Congress to be elected Speaker. The Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell also getting a challenge for the top spot in his party by Republican Senator Rick Scott, the current chair of the National Republican Senatorial Committee. Arizona Governor-elect Katie Hobbs celebrating her close victory over Republican challenger Kari Lake, a high-profile race. Kari Hobbs saying the voters chose sanity over chaos. FBI Director Christopher Wray getting questions at a House hearing about threats against elected officials after the attack on the husband of Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas pressed on border security and immigration issues before that same committee. And in the war in Ukraine, 2 missiles or rockets reportedly hit a farm in Poland near the border with Ukraine, and 2 people reportedly killed. It's unclear where the missiles came from, but they landed about the same time as a Russian missile attack on western Ukraine. Russia is denying they are at fault. The White House says that President Joe Biden has been briefed. This from Fox News. Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Republican from California, won the Republicans' designation for House Speaker on Tuesday, but questions remain over his ability to lock up the spot on the floor in January. He beat back a challenge by more conservative elements in the House Republican Conference represented by Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona. Final vote tally was 188 to 31. To become Speaker in January, Congressman McCarthy will need at least 218 votes if the entire 435-member House is seated and voting in January. Currently, the potential Republican majority looks to be anywhere from 218 seats, the bare minimum needed to control the House, and 228 seats. After the closed-door voting, the leaders came out to speak with reporters. Here is Kevin McCarthy.
Well, good evening. I'm proud to announce the era of one-party Democrat rule in Washington is over. Washington now has a check and balance. The American people have a say in their government. And this new Republican leadership team is ready to get to work to put America back on the right track. It was our commitment to America that we would create an economy that is strong, a nation that is safe, a future that is built on freedom, and a government that is accountable. And that's exactly what we'll do. I now want to bring up our conference chair, Elise Stefanik.
Thank you to our next Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy. I'm honored to earn support from my colleagues to continue serving as House Republican Conference Chair. We won this majority because of our commitment to America, and we are the last line of defense in a House Republican majority to stand up for the American people. And I particularly am proud, being from the state of New York, we picked up 4 seats in New York State, flipping blue districts to red, and we will have a tremendous Republican conference in the 118th Congress.
Elise Stefanik speaking to reporters along with other House Republican leaders, starting with Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy after their closed-door meeting and votes. Other leaders went on to make some comments, and then it was question time, and Leader McCarthy asked, how do you get to that 218 mark?
The Freedom Caucus has made a lot of demands, including to give themselves more power, more leverage over you, including to vacate the chair, giving them more power to vacate the chair. Are you open to that proposal from?
One thing I think, when the conference is this tight, I think we all work together. At the same time, nobody's going to have more power than anybody else. A majority like this, 4 people could decide the future, whatever it goes. So either we're going to lead as a team or we're going to lose as individuals. And I think at the end of the day, we will lead as a team.
Yes. Okay, first off, as far as vacating the chair, that's one thing. But what about all those other demands in that letter? Why haven't you responded to it? And why is it that you essentially blew off that entire letter completely? Will you respond?
Well, I don't agree with your comment there. They provided a letter in the different rules. The time we take up the rules now, I've met with them numerous times. We actually changed the process, where last night we just had a conference just to talk about amendments. Tomorrow we'll bring up half of them, talk about them, and I can't do anything by myself. It's the conference who decides what the conference rules are. And the interesting thing about the conference, everyone's going to have to give a little on both sides. But the number one thing I'm going to do as a leader is I'm going to listen to all voices in the conference, and we're going to do together what is best. The one thing you'll learn is, as my opportunity to be Speaker, is the House is going to change. No longer is all the power going to rest the way Nancy had it. No more proxy voting. Bills will actually go through committees. They will be debated before they come to the floor, and people will actually have a say. Why? Because you, the American public, have lent your voice to every single member, and you have a right for your voice to be heard, and that's exactly what we're going to do.
Leader McCarthy.
Yes, ma'am.
As you try to get to 218, do you want Democrats to try to support you?
No, we're the majority as Republicans, and we'll get there as Republicans.
Congressman Kevin McCarthy from California, the current Republican leader, minority leader, and if House Republicans do get that majority in the House, a couple of races still to be called from the election, he has been nominated to be Speaker. Again, the vote was 188 for him and 31 from the challenger, Congressman Andy Biggs, who on Monday night previewed that he'd be running for Speaker. He was on Newsmax TV.
We have a new paradigm here, and I think the country wants a different direction from the House of Representatives, and it's a new world. And yes, I'm going to be nominated tomorrow to the position of Speaker of the House. We'll see if we can get the job done. The votes, it's going to be tough. I mean, Kevin has raised a lot of money and done a lot of things, but this is not just about Kevin. I think it's about institutional direction and trajectory. And that's where we're going to see if we have enough people who agree that we need to change the trajectory of this place and open it up so where people can actually represent their constituency in a more open and transparent manner.
So let's just make this clear. It sounds like you just announced.
Yeah, I guess I did, kind of, didn't I?
So there you have it. We have some good news tonight. Your colleague, Congressman Matt Gaetz, has come out today and said that he will not be voting for Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House, even going as far as to say that McCarthy cannot be trusted as House Speaker. You know, is this indicative of how others in the Republican Party feel? Do we need this type of divisiveness in the Republican Party when we're trying to get our country back on track?
Look, I think what would, Matt has his opinions on it, but there are lots of people in this conference who have listened to their constituency, and their constituencies are saying, look, we need different leadership, both in the House and the Senate. We need to change the direction. We need people who are going to bring our body together and unite. I mean, there are things that we agree on. The Freedom Caucus agrees on with the more liberal or left, I don't want to say leftist, more moderate wing of the Republican Party. And that's everything from getting men out of women's sports. That's things like opening up the Keystone XL pipeline, building the fence, those policies like that. And at the same time saying, hey, let's get to the bottom of what happened with COVID. And if Dr. Fauci needs to be held accountable, we need to do that. And I think we have broad support, and we can't back down and acquiesce to what the Democrats want. We have to be strong with a positive message and go forward in that way.
Congressman Andy Biggs, Republican from Arizona, Monday night on Newsmax TV, announcing that today, as he did, will challenge Congressman Kevin McCarthy for the leadership spot in the Republican Party. And if the House Republicans do get a majority in the House, then that would be Speaker. The vote of the House Republican members behind closed doors, that vote again, 31 for Andy Biggs, 188 for Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy will need to get 218 votes in the full House in January to be elected Speaker. You heard him say a moment ago, as we played a clip from his news conference, that he does not intend to seek out Democratic members to switch over and support him. But there was some reporting this week that was happening among his supporters, his team, including to Henry Cuellar of Texas. And today, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat from New York, the caucus chair, asked about that strategy.
Congressman Cuellar said he got calls from allies of Leader McCarthy trying to get him to switch parties, and wondering if your side has done any outreach to any Republicans, and assuming Republicans take the majority, maybe a narrow one, would you guys try to work with breakaway Republicans to elect some sort of consensus speaker?
I think that's all premature until we have some definitive resolution on who gets to 218. But think about this for a moment. and I know for a fact that outreach has taken place to Representative Cuellar. The nerve of these individuals and how desperate are they that they literally just spent millions of dollars mischaracterizing Henry Cuellar's leadership and talked about the emergence of a red wave in the Rio Grande Valley, then get wiped out by Cuellar and Vicente Gonzalez and want to run to them saying, we need your help because we're struggling, because the American people rejected our extremism, because they saw us for who we are and are not confident, despite all of the gerrymandering that took place across the country, including in Florida, which may actually be decisive, but we'll see what happens at the end of the day. This wasn't an effort that they've earned at all. And now we see how desperate they are, reaching out to members like Henry Cuellar, literally days after he just defeated millions of dollars spent against him.
Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, the House Democratic Caucus chair, at a news conference today. This from the Hill newspaper. House Republicans elected Congressman Tom Emmer, Republican from Minnesota, the chief of their campaign team, to be House Majority Whip in a closed-door conference vote on Tuesday, ending a closely fought race with Congressman Jim Banks, Republican of Indiana, and Drew Ferguson, Republican from Georgia. And the conference separately voted to elect Congressman Steve Scalise, Republican from Louisiana, to be Majority Leader by voice vote. Steve Scalise had been serving as Minority Whip. On to the Senate Republican leadership race. Senator Rick Scott of Florida is running to unseat the Minority Leader Mitch McConnell as the top Republican in the Senate. He announced it in a note to Republican colleagues today, first obtained by Fox News Digital. He wrote, "I'm writing to you today because I believe it's time for the Senate Republican Conference to be far more bold and resolute than we have been in the past. We must start saying what we are for, not just what we are against. I do not believe we can simply continue to say the Democrats are radical, which they are. Republican voters expect and deserve to know our plan to promote and advance conservative values." Portion of the statement from Senator Rick Scott. Well, after the closed-door meeting among Senate Republicans, some of the leadership came out. Here is the current leader, Mitch McConnell.
Well, as you notice, we had a rather lengthy and fulsome discussion, not only of the election, but the way forward. And I think it's pretty obvious we may or may not be voting tomorrow. But I think the outcome is pretty clear. I want to repeat again, I have the votes. I will be elected. The only issue is whether we do it sooner or later, and I think we'll probably have another discussion about that tomorrow.
Senator McConnell's opening statement at the news conference after the other Senate Republicans who were with him made their statements. It was time for Q&A with the reporters. Senator McConnell back to the microphone.
We have this statement from Rick Scott going to challenge you. You said that you will have the votes. He says if you're for the status quo, don't vote for him. Do you interpret yourself as the status quo, and how do you respond to his challenge?
Well, look, I don't own this job. Anybody in the conference is certainly entitled to challenge me, and I welcome the contest.
One of the criticisms from Senator Scott and others who agree with him is that your decision not to have an agenda to run on opened up Republican candidates to attacks, that they didn't really stand for anything. What is your response to the criticism that you are partially responsible for?
Every one of our candidates knew what they were for, expressed it quite clearly. It's pretty obvious, and all of you have been writing about it, what happened. We underperformed among independents and moderates because their impression of many of the people in our party in leadership roles is that they're involved in chaos, negativity, excessive attacks, and it frightened independent and moderate Republican voters. And we saw that, which is why you all recall I never predicted a red wave. We never saw that in any of our polling in the states that we were counting on to win. There was no wave. We had national issue set that was favorable. But as a result of our own, the perception many of them had that we were not dealing with issues in a responsible way and that we were spending too much time on negativity and attacks and chaos, they were frightened. And so they pulled back. We, in two states, for example, excuse me, in two states, for example, got just crushed by independent voters, Arizona and New Hampshire. So we learned some lessons about this, and I think the lesson's pretty clear. Senate races are different. Candidate quality, you recall I said in August, is important. And in most of our states, we met that test. In a few of them, we did not.
Senator Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky, the current minority leader, with reporters today after a closed-door meeting with other Senate Republicans and the announcement from Senator Rick Scott, Republican of Florida, that he will challenge Senator McConnell as leader. Arizona Governor-elect Katie Hobbs holding a victory rally today, 1 week after the election, as just about all the votes have been counted and a winner has been declared. Associated Press saying that Democrat Katie Hobbs got 50.4% of the vote to Republican Kari Lake's 49.6%.
Last night, our race was officially called, and I am honored to stand before you as Governor-elect Katie Hobbs. I also want to congratulate Senator Mark Kelly on his reelection. And I'm thrilled to know that I will be handing the keys of the Secretary of State's office to Adrian Fontes. It has been a long year and a half. But in this election, Arizonans chose solving our problems over conspiracy theories. We chose sanity over chaos. And we chose unity over division. We chose a better Arizona, and we chose democracy, the system of government that made America the best and most prosperous country in the history of the world. But the attacks on democracy won't end today with this victory, and so it is on all of us to continue to defend it. Most of all, we must reject the false choice between standing up for democracy and standing up for an economy that works for everyone. We must reject the false choice between standing up for democracy and standing up for a woman's right to keep the government out of her personal health care decisions. And we must reject the false choice between standing up for democracy and fighting for a school system that has the resources it needs, has teachers in every classroom, and prepares our kids for tomorrow. Because without democracy, the people don't have a say, and all of our problems get dramatically worse. So today is a good day for Arizona, and it's a good day for democracy. We can all take a big sigh of relief, but the work goes on.
Arizona Governor-elect Katie Hobbs today at a rally in Phoenix. She's the first Democratic governor, or will be, in Arizona since 2006. Her Republican opponent, Kari Lake, tweeting Monday night after the race was called by multiple news outlets, "Arizonans know BS when they see it." Kari Lake was endorsed by former President Donald Trump, who also Monday night called into question the legitimacy of the vote count there, posting, "Wow, they just took the election away from Kari Lake. It's really bad out there." South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, also Republican, also supported by former President Trump, was easily reelected this year, beating Democratic nominee Jamie Smith 62% to 35%. Governor Noem was on a panel today with other Republican governors who were reelected. They were at the Republican Governors Association meeting in Orlando, Florida, and Governor Noem talking about what she took away from the race and advice to new governors.
You know, I was raised by a dad that said we don't complain about things, we fix them. And when you're governors, you're the fixers. Like, I served in Congress, and there are a lot of people give speeches and they don't do anything. Governors, literally, the buck stops with you, and so you have the chance every day to get up and make decisions to fix things. My lieutenant governor just reminded me of this conversation because our race got very tough. It was tough this summer in South Dakota because we had marijuana on the ballot, recreational marijuana. We had Medicaid expansion on our ballot. We had a lot of issues going on in South Dakota, and South Dakota never locked down. And we have the #1 economy in the country. So while you guys are saying inflation was #1 around the country, that wasn't true in South Dakota. In South Dakota, it was honesty in government, that they wanted to trust their elected officials. So while everything in the country was talking about something else, South Dakota was doing better because people's incomes have gone up there faster than anywhere else. Their businesses are thriving. Their kids are leading the country in educational outcomes. So, you know, we had to remind them of what was special about South Dakota. But my lieutenant governor said to me, you know, he said, listen, you need to remember what you said when you first got elected governor. He said, you walked into the transition team meeting and said to everybody that was around there as we were starting to hire cabinet and hire staff, and you said, listen, everybody in this room needs to realize that we're probably not going to be, you know, the most popular governor in South Dakota ever elected in history, because we're going to fix things. And when you fix things, somebody's going to get upset about something. And when we fix things, because South Dakota's economy was not thriving, incomes weren't going up, nobody was moving to our state, we had to fix a lot of stuff to make that happen. So I would just say, and he reminded me of that, and I said, okay, well, that's good perspective. We have to run hard, and we have to do everything just knowing we have to message and communicate. So what I would just tell new governors is over-communicate. I did the best when I was every day, even if it was on social media, sharing what my thoughts inside my head were, because God knows the media's not doing it. There are a bunch of liars who don't tell the truth, and I got real close to some of these national reporters that moved into South Dakota just to blow me up, and they told me that I moved me here just to blow you up every day. So I think that, you know, you can't ever count on the media to tell the story or the truth to people. They have to hear it from you. So that communication, I think, is incredibly important, and then fix things, and people will remember it.
Governor Kristi Noem, Republican from South Dakota, just reelected on a panel with other Republican governors at the Republican Governors Association meeting in Orlando, Florida today. The story from CNN, the House Select Committee investigating the January 6, 2021 Capitol Hill insurrection said that former President Donald Trump has failed to comply with its subpoena for documents and testimony. Democratic Congressman Benny Thompson and Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney, who serve as chair and vice chair of the committee respectively, saying in a statement, in the days ahead, the committee will evaluate next steps in the litigation and regarding the former president's noncompliance. The committee has previously held witnesses in contempt of Congress for defying the panel's subpoenas, but has little ability to force compliance with the subpoena quickly through the courts. That from CNN. Another member of the January 6th committee, Pete Aguilar, Democrat from California, asked today by reporters what happens next.
Donald Trump just clearly demonstratively snubbed the January 6th committee. The deadlines came, and you all didn't have a clear path of next steps ready to announce. What do you do now?
Well, I think it's been pretty clear from the individuals that he associates as well that he was not interested in cooperating with our subpoena. We have proven that there are consequences to individuals who don't comply. And I think, we'll eventually, continue to have the next word, on these issues. And we stand ready to work and continue to work through the final report that will be out between now and the end of the year. And, really our effort has been so nonpartisan. And I think that's the legacy of the committee, is that we're going to continue to move forward, engage in this process, put together a good work product, do it together. So we understand that the former occupant of the White House clearly made some decisions to snub us yesterday. We're confident in our work. And that history will judge the work that we've done to hold him and individuals around him accountable.
Congressman Pete Aguilar, a Democrat from California, member of the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol, at a news conference today. Former President Trump has sued the Select Committee, challenging the subpoena, according to filings in a federal court in Florida. David DePape, the man accused of breaking into the San Francisco home of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, looking for her, not finding her, and then savagely attacking her husband, Paul. David DePape has appeared in federal court and pleaded not guilty today to a charge of attempted kidnapping of a federal official and also a charge of assault of an immediate family member of a federal official. David DePape is being held without bail on state charges of attempted murder, burglary, and elder abuse, all of which he has pleaded not guilty to. The attack on Paul Pelosi was the starting point of some questions today at a House hearing with the FBI Director Christopher Wray about threats to government officials. Comes from Congressman Donald Payne Jr., Democrat from New Jersey.
Just a few weeks ago, an armed man broke into the San Francisco home of Speaker Pelosi in what appeared to be an assassination attempt. Although Speaker Pelosi was not home, the intruder violently attacked the Speaker's 82-year-old husband, putting him in the hospital. This attack occurred at a tense time for our nation, with extreme rhetoric suggesting violence against public officials. Director Wray, your own agency has also been subjected to such attacks after executing a search pursuant to a lawful warrant on the former president's residence, as we saw with the incident outside an FBI office in Ohio. To the panel, how do you assess the current threats against elected and government officials, and how do your agency proactively protect against this violence?
Well, I'll start off and see whether Secretary Mayorkas may want to chime in. The phenomenon that you're describing, Congressman, I think has two pieces of it. The first is related towards violence towards all sorts of individuals in government, kind of across the spectrum, and the second is law enforcement specific. On the first, we have seen a trend over the last several years of people more and more in this country, when they're upset or angry about something, turning to violence as the way to manifest it. And that is a very, very dangerous trend. There is a right way under the First Amendment to express how angry and upset you are about something or with somebody, but violence and violence against government officials is not it. But that is something that we've been seeing across the political spectrum now for quite a number of years. Second, I mentioned law enforcement. It is a reality that an already dangerous profession, namely law enforcement, has become more dangerous. Last year was the highest number of law enforcement officers shot and killed in the line of duty since 9/11. And I know personally, because we've had agents shot and killed. We had a task force officer shot and killed, ambushed right outside one of our small offices in Terre Haute, Indiana. And one of the things I did when I started in this job was that I said I was going to call every time an officer is shot and killed anywhere in the country in the line of duty. I was going to call the chief or the sheriff myself and express my condolences. And I've made way north of 200 of those calls. Often it's one a week. And each one of those officers killed leaves behind a family, a department, and a community that'll never be the same. And so the phenomenon that you described affects both government officials as victims across the spectrum, but also law enforcement uniquely. And it's a trend that we should all as Americans be concerned about.
FBI Director Christopher Wray getting a question from Congressman Donald Payne Jr., Democrat from New Jersey, at today's House Homeland Security Committee. We covered it all. You can find the video at our website at cspan.org. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Live Wednesday on C-SPAN Radio at 10 a.m. Eastern, the House Rules Committee holds a hearing on seating a Cherokee Nation delegate in the U.S. House. And live Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, a House Oversight and Reform Committee hearing on whether the U.S. Postal Service is ready for the holiday rush. Listen to C-SPAN on 90.1 FM in the Washington, D.C. metro area, cspan.org, and on the free C-SPAN Now video app.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast wherever you get your podcast and on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. Several members of the Federal Reserve Board of Governors saying this week that interest rates will continue to go up, but maybe at a slower pace than they have. This following that report last week that the rate of inflation in the U.S. seems to have eased a bit. Christopher Waller telling a conference in Australia these rates are going to keep going up, and they're going to stay high for a while until we see this inflation get down closer to our target. We've still got a ways to go. This isn't ending in the next meeting or two. And the Fed Vice Chair Lael Brainerd, in an interview with Bloomberg, saying, I think it will probably be appropriate soon to move to a slower pace of increases, but I think what's really important to emphasize is we have additional work to do. And the Fed Vice Chair for Supervision, Michael Barr, testifying today before the Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee in Washington. Some questions from Senator John Kennedy, Republican from Louisiana.
Mr. Chairman, Professor Jason Furman, I think you know him at Harvard, formerly of President Obama's administration, has said that he thinks unemployment has to rise by 5 percentage points for a whole year to bring inflation down a single percent. Do you agree with that?
Thank you, Senator. Let me just start by saying inflation right now is far too high.
Yes, sir, but I'm going to run out of time. Doggone it. That's just our chairman. He's fair, but he's tough as a boot, and he's going to cut me off. Do you agree with Professor Furman?
I think that it's the case that we're going to see significant softening in the economy. I don't have a projection that precise as Jason Furman to comment.
Let me ask you about Professor Larry Summers. He says that unemployment is going to have to rise to 7.5% and stay there for 2 years to get inflation down to 2%. Do you agree with that?
As I said, I think that we're going to see softening in the economy, but I don't have a prediction as precise as that one.
All right. Can we agree? You remember the inflation back in the 1980s under President Reagan and President Carter, and when Mr. Volcker was chairman. Can we agree that the only way we got control of inflation then was on both the fiscal and the monetary side?
Well, at the end of the day, it's the responsibility of the Fed to assure price stability consistent with maximum employment. So we're focused on our responsibility.
I know that, but you can't, if you depend on monetary policy alone, interest rates have to go higher. Or let me put it another way. If Congress cooperated and stopped spending money like it was ditch water, the Fed wouldn't have to raise rates as high. Is that a fair statement? To get control of inflation, of course.
I really won't have any comment on fiscal policy. We take the.
You think fiscal policy is irrelevant?
We take the fiscal policy that elected members of Congress and the President enact, and we calculate those in our decision making. But I don't have a comment on fiscal policy.
Questions from Senator John Kennedy, Republican from Louisiana, to Michael Barr, the Federal Reserve Vice Chair for Supervision, at today's Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee hearing. The main focus of the hearing was banking supervision. The other witnesses included the heads of the FDIC and the National Credit Union Administration, also the acting controller of the currency. A recurring topic today was whether and how cryptocurrency should be regulated. Late last week, the crypto exchange FTX had what the New York Times calls a corporate meltdown that has drained traders' accounts and plunged the crypto industry into crisis, with a run on deposits leaving an $8 billion shortfall on up to 1 million creditors. Senator Sherrod Brown, Democrat from Ohio, chairs the Banking Committee.
This year, we've seen cryptocurrency values collapse by $2,000 billion, and markets crash, crypto exchanges implode, file for bankruptcy, investors losing their money, workers losing their jobs. The parallels to past financial crises through our history are troubling. From wildcat money in the mid-1800s to the dot-com bubble burst in the 1990s to the over-counter derivatives that led to the 2007-8 financial crisis. Unlike traditional bank or credit union deposits, which Americans use to get paid, buy necessities, build their savings, private cryptocurrencies are not backed or protected by the government, and they shouldn't be. We've seen them used for speculation and fraud and scams, sanctions evasion, outright theft. There doesn't seem to be anything useful or beneficial that hundreds of speculative cryptocurrencies can be used for. Since I've been chairman of this committee for close to 2 years, many on my side of the aisle have raised warning flags about this. The last thing we need is for risky new financial products to crash our financial system. Thank you, those of you on this panel, for your skepticism about cryptocurrencies, and we will continue that work.
Senator Sherrod Brown, Democrat, Banking Committee Chair. Later in this hearing, a response from the ranking Republican on the committee, Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania.
I think I heard the chairman refer to crypto as risky new financial products, and the insinuation was that they might have the ability to crash our financial system. I think there's a really important distinction that I want to underscore here. If you look at what happened with FTX, what at least appears to have happened by a very extensive coverage, this is fundamentally not about the kind of assets that were held by FTX. It's about what individuals did with those assets. There are a lot of corollaries, there are a lot of analogies here. One comes to mind. In 2011, MF Global, commodity brokerage firm. It was run by former New Jersey Senator John Corzine. It collapsed after customer funds were misappropriated to fill a shortfall caused by the firm's exposure to some trading that went south. Now, nobody suggested that the problem was the instruments that were used. The problem was the use of customer funds. Similarly, the 2008 financial crisis involved disastrous consequences with what people were doing with mortgages. Did we decide we got to ban mortgages? Of course not. So let's look at FTX. It certainly appears to be an egregious failure to treat customer assets as segregated assets. It appears that the leadership there attempted to fill a hole at an affiliated company. And it occurs to me that this is a worry that I don't have for one split second about my stocks or my bonds or my treasuries when they're held in custody by American banks.
Senator Pat Toomey, Republican, at today's Banking Committee hearing, one of the last that Senator Toomey will be attending. He has decided not to run for re-election and will leave the Senate in January. He's from Pennsylvania. Wall Street today, the Dow up 56, NASDAQ up 162, S&P up 34. From Associated Press, prices at the wholesale level rose 8% in October from a year ago, the fourth straight decline and the latest sign that inflation pressures in the United States are easing from painfully high levels. Some U.S. House Republicans on the Homeland Security Committee giving a bit of a preview on how they will be addressing the issues of immigration and border security should Republicans ultimately get that majority of House seats. It is getting close. Congressman Clay Higgins of Louisiana questioning the Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas.
Mr. Chairman, a major threat to our homeland is clearly the arterial bleed at our southern border and the disintegration of our sovereignty down there, and the top threat to individual rights and freedoms for Americans from sea to shining sea, Mr. Ray, is the weaponization of the FBI against the American citizens that you've sworn to serve. Secretary Mayorkas, for the record, are you aware or have you authorized CBP agents to release illegal aliens into America without identifying, screening, or vetting them properly, or harvesting even basic biometric data like fingerprints?
Congressman, our nation's sovereignty stands strong, and our brave men and women in the Border Patrol and throughout U.S. Customs.
Are you aware or have you authorized CBP agents to release illegal aliens into America without having properly vetted, identified them, or collected at least basic biometric data like fingerprints?
Congressman,
I mean, you got millions coming across.
Congressman, our
gentleman from Ms. Higgins, allow the Secretary to answer.
It's my time, Mr. Chairman. If I want to reclaim my time, I will.
Yeah,
I'm going to move on without an answer. Mr. Chairman, are you asking for me to yield you time?
No, I'm the chair.
Then I'm going to reclaim my time.
Look, we don't.
Moving on,
No,
Secretary
no,
Mayorkas.
the gentleman from.
Are you interrupting my time, Mr. Chairman? Or
well,
are you requesting me to use your time?
I'm trying to make sure that we conduct.
You're interfering with my 5 minutes, Mr. Chairman.
Well, then the gentleman will
If you request me to yield you time, I'll give you time.
No, but that's not the procedure.
But that is the procedure.
It is not.
Yes, it is.
So,
of course it is.
Look,
I reclaim my time, and I want this time back. Secretary Mayorkas, have you used your authority to suppress exculpatory evidence presented by CBP agents who've come under public attack and condemnation by DHS and the Biden administration? Have you used your authority to suppress exculpatory evidence presented by CBP agents who've come under public attack and condemnation by you and the Biden administration?
2 points, if I may, Congressman. Number one, in response to your second question, I don't even know what you're referring to. And with respect to your first
I'll
question,
take that as that you're on the record as
US
saying
Customs-
no,
US
that you have
Customs-
not used your authority to suppress exculpatory evidence. If you're an honorable man, then obviously you should be able to say no to that. Who would suppress exculpatory evidence? Is your answer no?
I don't even know what you're referring to, Congressman.
You will.
And if I may, in
Secretary
response-
Mayorkas, have you used your authority to retaliate against DHS agents who served on special details during the Trump administration, agents identified by your administration as conservatives or Trump supporters?
Once again, Congressman, I don't even know what you're referring to.
You're before Congress. I'm going to take that as a no. Through your authority, Secretary Mayorkas, have you encouraged your chain of command to suppress basic law enforcement actions at the border and harass or victimize or intimidate experienced frontline law enforcement agents at the border using internal investigations and threats of disciplinary action or transfer in order to force those agents to comply with DHS policies that actually injure the security of our homeland and are contrary to the sworn oath of those agents? Is that the culture you've created?
Congressman, I don't even know what you're referring to.
You will.
And I am
Secretary Mayorkas,
building
final
a
question,
culture
good sir.
of honor and
It's been
service
rumored
and nobility throughout the Department of Homeland Security. That is
you
what
represent
that is what I am
nobility,
dedicated-
Secretary Mayorkas?
Congressman, that is what I am dedicated to.
It's been rumored, Secretary, that you're going to resign prior to January the 3rd. Is any truth to those rumors?
That is a false rumor.
All right. We look forward to seeing you in January.
Congressman Clay Higgins, Republican from Louisiana, questioning the Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas at today's Homeland Security Committee hearing. You also heard from the current chairman, Democrat Benny Thompson of Mississippi. Over the past weekend, the head of Customs and Border Protection, the Commissioner Chris Magnus, resigned. CBS News reports that he had been asked to step down by Department of Homeland Security leaders frustrated with his leadership, and that he had earned a reputation as a progressive law enforcement reformer while serving as police chief in Tucson, Arizona, Richmond, California, and Fargo, North Dakota. Also in that article, in fiscal year 2022, a 12-month period that ended September 30th, CBP officials along the Mexican border processed migrants nearly 2.4 million times, an all-time high. Now the G20 summit in Bali, Indonesia. This from the New York Times article. While President Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping have eased tensions between their countries, they're vying for influence in Asia and beyond, offering competing stances on how to address poverty and the war in Ukraine. Mr. Xi has cast China as a steadfast partner to the region, rejecting what he described as the United States' Cold War mentality of forming security alliances. President Biden unveiled fresh steps by rich Western countries, promising hundreds of billions of dollars to build infrastructure in poor countries, an effort widely seen as a counter to China's Belt and Road Initiative. President Biden spoke today about that at a meeting on the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment.
Focusing on our efforts of the G20. Do I have this on? Yes. The G20 toward restoring and recovering together and recovering stronger. As we were saying outside, we were having a photograph taken. I'm convinced we're going to come out of this crisis we've been through in the pandemic and other things stronger than we went in. Every time we engage, we get better. And today we're focused on investing together and investing stronger than we have in the past. In June, I joined my fellow G7 leaders to officially launch the Partnership for Global Infrastructure and Investment, with the collective goal of mobilizing $600 billion in 5 years for quality, sustainability, and innovative infrastructure and investments in low and middle-income countries. As I've spoken with my Canadian friends, this is something that we have an obligation to do, it seems to me, to deal with those nations that are not the primary cause of many of our problems, but are now left with a great deal of difficulty. I want to emphasize the word investments. Investments that are driven by local needs, development with our partners, and delivering real results to improve the lives of all of our people. Through the partnership, we've already launched an array of new projects with countries across the G20 and beyond, collaborating in new ways on climate, energy security, and digital connectivity, health infrastructure, and gender equity and gender equality.
President Biden at the G20 Leaders Summit in Indonesia joined at this meeting about infrastructure investment by the presidents of Indonesia and the European Commission. White House says that President Biden also held meetings with the presidents of Turkey and Italy and will meet with the new British Prime Minister before leaving. The G20 also looking to make an official statement on Russia's invasion of Ukraine. A draft declaration given to the media reads, most members strongly condemn the war in Ukraine and stressed it is causing immense human suffering and exacerbating existing fragilities in the global economy. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, who's at the summit in place of Russian President Vladimir Putin, saying the declaration had been politicized by Ukraine's Western allies. Also on the front line, Russia firing dozens of missiles today at Ukraine's energy facilities, causing widespread blackouts across the country. And the U.S. Defense Department says it is investigating reports that 2 of the missiles crossed into NATO member Poland, killing 2 people. Reports come from Associated Press citing a senior U.S. intelligence official speaking on condition of anonymity. Pat Ryder is the Pentagon press secretary.
Let me go ahead and highlight up front that we are aware of the press reports alleging that 2 Russian missiles have struck a location inside Poland near the Ukraine border. I can tell you that we don't have any information at this time to corroborate those reports and are looking into this further. And so when we do have an update to provide, we'll be sure to do so.
That's the Pentagon press secretary, Air Force Brigadier General Pat Ryder. The White House saying that President Joe Biden spoke with the president of Ukraine after this, and the president of Ukraine also speaking with the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg and with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Russia has denied any responsibility. Defense Ministry saying through state media no strikes were made against targets near the Ukrainian-Polish state border by Russian means of destruction. Pat Ryder today at the Pentagon also asked what this means in terms of the wider war.
Biden has said a few times that the U.S. will defend every inch of NATO territory. If these reports are true, what does that look like for the administration?
Yeah, thanks, Idris. So, as I mentioned, we're looking into these reports, don't have any information to corroborate them at this time. So I don't want to speculate or get into hypotheticals. When it comes to our security commitments and Article 5, we've been crystal clear that we will defend every inch of NATO territory. Thank you.
Pentagon Press Secretary, Brigadier General, the Air Force, Pat Ryder at today's news conference at the Pentagon. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says that Russia is involved in a serious escalation with these strikes. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba denied that the explosions heard were caused by Ukrainian air defenses. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word to get the stories Washington is talking about sent to your inbox every day. You can subscribe at c-span.org/connect.